Hey, it's me, Guy Raz, here, host of How I Built This and a brand new podcast, The Great Creators. And this is a show I'm super excited about. Every week, I talk to some of the most incredible artists, musicians, actors, comedians in the world, and we talk about their creative process and also about their lives. And today, another video episode for you with Graham Nash, the legend himself. Graham Nash is one of the very few people on the planet who is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, not once, twice. Once as the founding member of the band The Hollies, and the second time, of course, as a member of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. And if you've ever found yourself humming songs like Marrakesh Express or Our House or Teach Your Children, you know his work. Today, I'm going to be talking with Graham about his entire career, from making a top 10 song at age 22 to still performing and recording new music 6 decades later. You're going to hear and find out how he let his heart guide him in his career, how a stoned dinner in Los Angeles completely changed him and popular music forever, and how at age 80, he still finds inspiration every day from wandering through the streets of New York with a camera. So we're going to start our conversation back in 1942. That's the year that Graham was born into a working-class family right outside of Manchester, England, right in the middle of World War II. I mean, you grew up at a time, and there's a famous photograph of David Bowie sitting on like ruins in, Brixton or wherever in London as a kid, and you grew up outside of Manchester in Salford, and that was your childhood, right? It was like still homes that were destroyed from the World War II aerial bombing.
Absolutely. The war didn't stop until 1945, and I was born in 1942, so I had 3 years of memories. My earliest memory is of me in my pram. I'm reading a comic book. I'm not reading it, of course. I'm only 2.5 years old. But it was upside down.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at this book upside down and then looking at my mother closing the curtains. They had to close the curtains and black out all light coming from any room because we didn't want the German aircraft to spot the light from a bedroom or something and then bomb that house. So yeah, I grew up. I actually, a little later we're going to talk about remotely recording, and I'm going to play you the beginning of this song called Stars and Stripes, which was that I can't remember when my world was not on fire, where people lived in fear and flames. I mean, that's my life. I mean,
you mentioned that the war ended in 1945, but a lot of people don't realize that in Britain, the war didn't end for another 10 or 15 years. I mean, there was rationing for a long time
Indeed.
In the UK, and that was your childhood. And I imagine it was like, deprivation, or you didn't get, even things like butter and chocolate and those were
luxury.
Not,
butter and chocolate. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
But that's the way it was. And the truth is that, I only found out when I was in my late 20s that Salford was one of the biggest slums in England.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know that.
It was where you grew up.
Right. It's where I grew up. All my friends, we were poor, but so was everybody else. So we weren't so different, But what an incredible upbringing. But it made me realize that if we can make it through 2 world wars, we can make it through anything.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about music in your family, because from what I understand, neither of your parents were musicians or particularly focused on music.
Not at all.
At all, really.
No.
But you got into it early. You were listening to radio from Luxembourg and shortwave, and you were listening to American top 40 music, right?
Absolutely. When I was supposed to be going, to bed and Sunday evening, getting ready for school the next day, the American Top 40 was, being blasted out from Radio Luxembourg. And it was actually a radio station in Luxembourg. And occasionally when the weather, cooperated with us, we could hear it quite plainly. And
those waves would travel into Salford.
Absolutely. And also they would travel from the very simple radio. I think BBC only had like 2 channels then. but I could hear it through my bedpost.
Yeah.
And if I put my ear to my bedpost, I could hear the American Top 40, and that's what started me. And once I had learned, the basic 3 chords on a guitar and could play every Buddy Holly song that he wrote, it was an interesting time in my life. And my parents, thankfully, would not let me deviate from that. I had a couple of real jobs, with my friend Alan Clark, who started the Hollies with me in December of 1962. But my mother and father always encouraged me. They saw my passion for music. And instead of crushing it and say, get a real job, this music stuff's not going to last more than 2 years. And here we are 50-odd years later, and I'm talking to you about music.
It's amazing. Tell me about Alan Clark. I mean, you would, as you say, you would go on to form the Hollies with him. He was a child. You met him when you were like a kid, 6, 7 years old, and he was your...
I've just finished... here's what's going on with Alan. He's making a new solo record, and he wanted me to sing on a couple of things.
Wow.
But as usual, as a musician, I got carried away and I sang on every track. But I did write one song, which starts, we met at school when we were children. Both of us were 6 years old, as I recall. And that's the first verse of this song that I wrote for Alan. So yeah, Alan Clark's got a new record coming out, probably in October. And I'm singing with him, and I was proud to do so. And I'm very honored to sing with Alan because, he had left the Hollies many years ago because he had trouble with his throat. He couldn't find those beautiful high notes anymore. But now he's singing like an angel. And, I'm looking forward to seeing his record come out.
Can you sing just a little bit of that song? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. I just have to hear what that sounds like. Just a few lines.
We met at school when we were children. Both of us were 6 years old, as I recall. And from that early age, the music brought us together to sing harmony to all. That's the first couple of verses.
That's amazing. I mean, I didn't want to get into this so early, but I think it's important to note that you and Alan would eventually be inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame together as part of the Hollies.
Yes.
And you met as children in Salford. I mean, I think both of you early on were really influenced by skiffle. This was it was actually this kind of American music that really became popular.
Yes, there was a man called Lonnie Donegan.
Yeah, Lonnie Donegan, right? And this was like it's like a sort of a jangly kind of a rockabilly.
And very, very simple to do. And that's what was great.
Yeah.
Because, 14 and 15-year-old kids after the war, I mean, we had nothing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we would have a ball and we'd kick it around and play football on the street, but there was really nothing to do. And then when skiffle came along, and it was realized that if you had a cheap acoustic guitar and a washboard, which was an instrument that your grandmother used to wash clothes with, you'd use that with thimbles on your fingers as a drums, right? And a T-chest bass, which was, a T-chest, and a broom handle, and a string connecting them. And so if you had those instruments and you knew 2 or 3 chords, you could actually play music. And that's what happened. So skiffle, particularly because of Lonnie Donegan, was incredibly popular in England and was the start of everything. Even the Beatles will give it up for skiffle. They knew what it was, and they knew what it could do. And we could enjoy ourselves, we could express ourselves, and we could attract women too.
Yeah. There are famous stories about John Lennon and Paul McCartney as young boys, writing music together after school in their bedrooms together. And you and Alan, you started making music together early. Take me into I don't know, your bedroom or his bedroom when you were 14, 15 years old, were the two of you doing a similar thing, sitting in each other's bedrooms, just writing? And
what we would do is what everybody did. You would emulate someone who you admired. And in my case, it was either Buddy Holly or the Everly Brothers, right? And you would I also wrote this song called Buddy's Back for Alan's album. Mm-hmm. And it's about the Hollies' love for Buddy Holly. And it's an incredibly simple song.
Oh,
it's 3 chords. It's nothing, mm-hmm. but it's so joyous, you know. And you know, we would and the second verse is in front of a mirror we would play, and we'd copy their style, and then we'd just let it go. And that's what we did. We stood there trying to look like Elvis and shake your ass, and you know, and me and Alan would stand in front of a mirror and pretend we were the Everly Brothers. And once we had done that and made it our own, we then let it go and just began to make music the way we wanted to make music, having learned from the best.
You guys met the Everly Brothers in 1960. I'm wondering, but I can't remember, but around that time, the Everly Brothers' sort of best-known songs, Bye Bye Love, Wake Up Little Susie, eventually covered by Simon and Garfunkel, too, who were big Everly Brothers fans. They were touring, and you met them.
Actually, first of all, we saw them in Manchester.
In Manchester, okay. And did you get to meet them at that time?
And this is how we met them. We figured out that there was no tour bus outside the gig. So they weren't going to get in the tour bus and drive to the next city. We also knew that the best hotel in Manchester, the Midland Hotel, was only 100 yards away from the gig.
So they had to be there.
So we kind of figured that that's where they would be staying if they're staying in town. So after the concert, me and Clarky stood on the steps of the Midland Hotel for a couple of hours. And about 1:30 in the morning, we had missed the last bus home. We knew that we had to walk about 9 miles in the rain. We didn't care. They came round the corner, and they'd been at a nightclub, and they'd had a few drinks, and they were in a good mood. And there we were on the steps of the Midland Hotel. Don and Phil and me and Alan. And they're talking to us as people, not just fans. You know, what do you want to do? Well, you know, we want to make music like you, and me and Alan sing together, and we love your music and stuff. Okay, that was that time. That was, I believe, either 1960 or 62. I think it was 60. Mm-hmm. 4 years later, the Hollies were pretty famous. We're playing the London Palladium. Yeah. And Pete Seeger was the headliner. After the sound check at around 4:30, the phone rang backstage. Our tour manager, Rod Shields, picks up the phone and goes, yeah? Uh-huh. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, hold on. And he starts to hand me the phone. And I go, who is it? He goes, it's Phil Everly. I said, look, don't screw with me like that. That's not nice. He goes, it's Phil Everly. So I pick up the phone. I go, hello? He goes, hey, Graham, it's Phil. And obviously I recognize his voice, you know, from my DNA. And it was Phil. Yeah. And I said, I'd love to talk to you, but why are you calling me at the London Palladium here? He said, well, me and Don are in town and we want to make an album called Two Yanks in England. Do the Hollies have any songs that they haven't recorded? And we had a lot of them because that's all we were doing was sitting around writing songs. So we went down to their hotel, the Ritz Hotel in London, and we played them about 8 songs, and they chose 7 of them. And they said, yeah, we want to do these songs. And I went, wow, that's amazing. When are you going to start the record? He said, tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Okay, would you like to come? Sure, we would like to come. Now then, the studio players on this record, one of them on piano was Reggie Dwight. Reggie Dwight, of course, became Elton John.
Whoa, Elton
Jimmy
John.
Page and John Paul Jones on bass and guitar, of course.
In that studio?
In that studio. And you could hire them for £10 a session. They weren't in Led Zeppelin, and they weren't Elton.
You had Elton John, Led Zeppelin, and the Everly Brothers.
Indeed.
In the same room, and Graham Nash.
Yes, and Alan Clark. Yeah.
That's like a moment in history.
In 1992, Crosby, Stills, and Nash are going to play in Toledo, Ohio, at a place.
Yeah.
I get there the day before. The phone rings in my hotel room. Very unusual. Hey, Graham, it's Phil. I go, okay, why are you calling me in Toledo, Ohio? He says, well, you know where you guys are playing tomorrow? And I said, yeah. He said, we're playing there tonight. Do you want to come? Of course I want to come. So me and my best friend, Mac Holbert, go down to the Everly Brothers bus, and we get on the bus and we drive 5 minutes to the gig. And at 5 o'clock, like most rock and roll bands, you're having rubber chicken for dinner, you know. And Don looks at me and he goes, so,
yeah.
What are you going to sing with us? I'm dying inside.
Oh, wow.
It's been a lifelong dream. I'm trying to be cool. I go, well, you know, I like that song, So Sad. Dun, 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 dun. That's going to be really great. And so Don goes, in E? I go, yeah, that sounds like a good key. So Phil says to me, okay, I'll sing underneath Don. You take my part. I said, why?
Wow.
He said, because I have the high part. I said, Phil, look who you're talking to. I learned how to sing high going on top of you and Don. So you stay exactly where you are, and I will sing on top of both of you. I have a board tape, a cassette, of me singing So Sad with the Everly Brothers in 3-part that knocks me on my ass to this day.
Wow. Wow. It's such an incredible story because 1992, you were already a legend, and here you are just like talking about this moment like a fan and somebody who just appreciates their work so much, and what an honor it was to be on stage with them. And at that moment, and to the fans, it was probably amazing, but they thought, oh, Graham Nash is coming out. Awesome. To you, you're like, oh, my God, I'm on stage with the Everly Brothers.
Yes, an incredible history, you know, but it just happens to me. Because life is made up of choices. But all my life, I've had my life lead me. I've never said, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do that, I want to go there. I've gone because that was the right choice. And I moved this way because it was the right choice. Perfect example, when I first heard me and David and Stephen sing in Joni's living room.
Wait, don't tell me that story yet, because I want to just pause for a minute, because I want to savor that story. But I want to ask you very briefly about when Phil Everly called you in 1960, or whatever the year was, to record with them. Because you and Alan Clark had started the Hollies, and you were getting a lot of attention, and you'd have a bunch of hits. Did they remember you guys meeting them on the steps of the Midland Hotel?
I asked them that, and of course they said yes. I mean, because that's what you would do. You would go, yes, of course I remember you.
Yeah.
Yes. You're Graham, right? Yeah.
Right.
No, maybe they did.
Right.
They said they did. Maybe they didn't. But, just even talking to them was fantastic for me.
It's so cool. I mean, you're a fan, and then 4 years later, you're recording them with them.
So anyway, just to finish off the story of the Everly Brothers, I played in Knoxville, Tennessee. And a guy from the city council came up to me and he said, a lot of people think the Everly Brothers were from Nashville, but they actually started in Knoxville, Tennessee, with their father's radio show. And when they were young, between 5 and 9 years old, they were in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the city wants to build a small park in honor of the Everly Brothers. And could I help them? So, can I help them?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So what I did is I called Paul McCartney, I called Paul Simon, I called Brian Wilson, I called Keith Richards, I called a bunch of people. I called Carole King, Anne from Heart. I called all these people because what they were doing on the steps of the park, they wanted to create marble stones with a short sentence and the signature of who it was. And I got every single one of them to write a small sentence and sign it. And in that park today
Wow.
is all those people that loved the Everly Brothers.
It's amazing that sort of that chart, if it was like an org chart of the Everly Brothers and all of the bands and all the artists they influenced.
It is remarkable.
It's actually remarkable. I want to ask you about the Hollies, because the Hollies were really successful and obviously eventually inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. You had some amazing songs. Carrie Ann is one of my favorites. This was a very much like sort of a British invasion. I think I would say like the British invasion rock and roll sound, right? I mean, that was what the Hollies were. It was part of like that sort of that sound that was coming out of Britain. How did you feel about it?
We were kind of amazed, because what would happen is that, people around would have cousins and uncles that were in the merchant navy who would go to America, and they'd buy records and they'd bring them back. So all those early rhythm and blues records of the Coasters and all those, Benny Spellman and all those great people, we would find them. So what we would do is we'd learn those songs and then we would sing them. Mm. And we couldn't believe that we were singing American songs back to them and selling them to the American people. We didn't, that was kind of amazing. But yeah, it did happen.
There's, and you talk about this a little bit in your memoirs, but there's different interpretations of this. But basically, from what I gather, by the late 60s, you started to kind of outgrow that style. You didn't want to make that kind of pop music as much anymore. You wanted to do something different. And
I didn't quite know what that was.
And you felt that the band was kind of provincial in its view, that it was still kind of stuck in Salford and that sort of in Britain. And
also making those kind of records, we learned how to make those kind of records that you couldn't forget after a couple of listenings and that could make it up the charts and all those things. We did all that. But we did that. When I was with them, we had 15 top 10 records, and here's what happened. I'd written this song called King Midas in Reverse in a small town called Split, which at that point was in Czechoslovakia. Not sure.
In Yugoslavia.
In Yugoslavia, excuse me, yes. Yeah. And I wrote that song. I thought it was a decent song, and I thought we made a pretty decent record of it. But instead of roaring up into the top 10, it only made it into the lower top 30.
Yeah.
Now, that's when the Hollies started to not agree with my musical direction. And I began to realize that I needed to change. And then, once again, choices. I wanted to spend some time with a girlfriend of mine called Joni Mitchell. And I went to Los Angeles from London to spend 2 or 3 days with Joan. When I got to her house in Laurel Canyon, I heard more male voices coming out of the house. And I wasn't happy about that. But it was David and Stephen.
David Crosby and Stephen Stills.
Yeah.
And David Crosby was obviously already super famous from the Byrds and Buffalo Springfield.
He'd been thrown out of the Byrds. And the Buffalo Springfield, which was Stephen, of course, were breaking up. And so Stephen and David were trying to do a kind of a duo thing, like an Everly Brothers kind of thing, la, 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 la. And after dinner, we'd smoked a big one, and David says...
By the way, did they know you? Did they know who you were?
Oh, yes. They knew who I was.
They knew the Hollies. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Yep. They knew the Hollies. They liked the high voices, and that was me. And David said to Stephen, he says, play Willie that song. And they'd been rehearsing a song of Stephen's called You Don't Have to Cry, which was on the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record. They got to the end of it. I congratulated Stephen. I thought it was a brilliant song.
What was the song he sang?
You Don't Have to Cry.
You Don't Have to Cry, yeah.
They got to the end of the first rendition, and I said, okay, sing it one more time. And they did. They got to the end of the second time singing it, and I said, all right, just bear with me. I'm not crazy, but sing it one more time. And in the first 2 times that they'd sung it, I got my stuff together. I knew what the body language was.
Yeah.
I knew when Stephen was starting a phrase and how he would end a phrase. I knew how long Crosby could hold a note. I knew the words. I'm good at what I do. I've been doing this a long, long time. On that third time, I brought my harmony in, and after 45 seconds, we had to stop and start laughing because obviously the Byrds and the Springfield and the Hollies were pretty decent harmony bands, but this was something very different. This was something that we had created when we made our three voices into one. That was completely unique. And Joni was the only witness.
It's amazing. I mean, that song it's so beautiful. It's like crushingly beautiful.
Yes.
You know, that and I can't imagine your reaction when you first heard the song, but I'm trying to imagine, like, what a moment in history. 1969, 68, you're in Laurel Canyon in L.A., in Joni Mitchell's house.
Yes.
With David Crosby, a young David Crosby, a young Stephen Stills, a young Graham Nash, meeting these guys, listening to them harmonize on a song. There's no Crosby, Stills, and Nash yet.
Right.
And here you are, like, yeah, let me sing this. Let's just do something creative.
Yep, that's what happened. And my life changed. And once again, my life led me to the next thing. And the next thing was, I've never heard anything like this. I want this sound. Because when you realize what that sound was, and you combine that with the songs that we had, and you combine that with decent musicianship, you've got a pretty winning formula. And that's exactly what happened. And once I had heard me and David and Stephen sing, my life changed completely. I realized I would have to go back to England. I would have to break up the Hollies. I would have to leave all my stuff. I would have to leave everything and follow that sound. And that's what I did.
It seems to me that already in the late sort of 66, 67, you started to kind of have a mental shift in what you wanted to do. There's a story I read about the song Marrakesh Express, which is you went to Morocco to go check it out. A lot of sort of hippies and stuff were riding this train, and you wrote that song on that journey, brought it back to the Hollies, and they didn't want to record it.
They did want to record it, reluctantly. Now then, to me, the track of Marrakesh Express, my song, has to be like a train. It has to be powerful and
sounds like a train, yeah. And even that beginning, that
that's Stephen's brilliance. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there is somewhere in the tape vaults of Abbey Road in London, there is a version of the Hollies doing Marrakesh Express, which quite frankly sucks.
And it's never been released?
No, I don't believe so. Because there's no vocal on it. It's just the track.
So you brought it to them, and you did record something, but that song, tell me, I mean, that song is like observational. It's really what was unfolding around you, right?
Which is what because here's what I figured out. I knew that I had learned the ability to write a song that, you know, a melody of which you couldn't forget if you'd heard it a couple of times, as I said before.
Yeah.
But I realized that if I could take that gift of creating melodies and put decent words to them, like David was doing, like Stephen was doing, like Joni, of course, was doing, that I would be able to create better songs. And that's what happened. And I began to realize what they were doing and realize that I have to do the same. I have to start talking about reality, not just Moon, June, Screw Me in the Back of the Car kind of songs.
You have a line in there, sweeping cobwebs from the edges of my mind.
Yep.
What were those? Do you remember what those cobwebs were at that time?
All my feelings with the Hollies, all those cobwebs. Should I stay with the Hollies? Should I leave the Hollies? And once again, choices. My life led me because I made the choice to follow the sound that David and Stephen and I had created.
So you come to L.A. to start a brand new life, armed with songs. You have Teach Your Children you'd written. You'd Marrakesh Express, which you'd already written. But before you were working, or sort of, how did you, the three of you, decide? I mean, how did you decide that you had some? I mean, you knew you had something when you were at Joni Mitchell's house and you record You Don't Have to Cry, or you do You Don't Have to Cry, just an impromptu concert for Joni Mitchell in her living room. But was it at that point where the three of you said, let's do this? I mean, or did it take a little bit?
Yeah, it took a little bit of time. It took 45 seconds.
Before you said, we've got...
Once we started to laugh, because what we had created was so unique to us, we knew what we had to do. And I knew what the rest of my life was going to be, that I was going to make music with these guys until we couldn't make music anymore. And that's, of course, where we are now. But look what we did in the last 50-odd years.
It's like, I mean, you think about that time, right, Graham? And you were there. Not only there, you were an actor in that story, in that history of all of those people, right, in Laurel Canyon. There were sort of two centers of sort of, I think, culture and influence around rock and roll. One was the Bay Area, San Francisco, and one was Southern California. And
don't forget what was happening on the East Coast too, you know, with the Velvet Underground and what Bowie was doing.
Which came a little bit, I guess around that time, yeah, sort of that was maybe sort of early 70s, but yeah, right, exactly. But I mean, but you're like talking about an era of like, there's, you know, you walk down to the grocery store and there'd be Mama Cass, and, you know, you'd see like, you know, the mamas, the papas, and like, and there's, you know.
But you know, you must understand something, Guy. You and I are talking right now because of Cass Elliot. I think that Cass knew what David and Stephen sounded like in their effort to be a duo. She knew I was unhappy with the Hollies, and she knew what the three of us would sound like. I swear to God, she internally knew what we would sound like. And that's why on every single record since she passed away, I've given credit to Cass Elliot, because if it hadn't been for Cass, we wouldn't be here.
Do you when you left the UK, I mean, it's not just a physical departure, it's also this kind of spiritual departure, because it was what you knew was your life. It was your best friend, Alan Clark. It was this band, the Hollies, that you formed. How did that impact your relationship at that time? I can't imagine he was. I'm making, you know, a new solo record now, and it's being produced by Todd Caldwell, my keyboard player. Yeah. And I was talking with Todd yesterday about exactly that, about, you know, the guilt that I felt leaving Alan. He couldn't be a part of the Crosby, Stills and Nash sound. I had to leave him. He was my oldest friend. As I said, I've known him since I was 6 years old. And I have felt a little bit of guilt all these years. And that's why I am honored to be able to sing on 10 tracks with Alan Clark for his new record. And his new record.
And I never charged him a penny, not one penny, because I was honored to do it. And I must confess, it kind of got rid of my guilt feeling about having left him all those years ago.
I mean, when you were 6 years old playing at the Salford Lads Club, could you have imagined that at 81 years old, he'd be recording a solo album and you'd be on it?
No, and the last verse of that song that I was singing to you about meeting Alan is, and here we are touching 80, and we are not children, and we have lived our lives together and apart. That's the last verse. So yes, it's been a long time.
I'm curious, and I'm sort of jumping ahead from the timeline, but I'm on this idea of being 81 and using your voice. Your voice has been your superpower, especially your ability to hit higher notes. And over time, our voices change as we get older. Our bodies change, but you still have to figure out how to use this superpower that you have and make it work. And how have you, over the years, and especially now, figured out, because your voice is still so great hearing you sing, how have you sort of figured out how to work with it and not fight it? Because you can't do the things you could do when you were 25.
I can do them better. I'm singing,
really?
I'm serious. I'm singing better now than I ever sang in my life.
Wow.
And I'm not kidding. And wait until you hear my new record.
Wow.
You will go, holy Toledo. I mean, don't forget, I made those 2 live albums of Songs for Beginners and Wild Tales in 4 shows in 2019. That was only, 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And I got an incredible compliment. There's a mastering engineer who is very famous in the music industry. His name is Bob Ludwig. And Bob has worked with me, almost for 60 years. We have never really spoken to each other, meaning that, yes, here's the album, Bob, do your best. Oh, Bob, that sounds great. But he wrote to me and he said, look, all those years ago, I worked, meaning him, I worked on Songs for Beginners and Wild Tales. And I have to tell you one thing, you are singing better than you did then. And that was from Bob Ludwig, who is a pair of ears that is unbelievable. And so that was a great compliment to me. I don't do anything. I don't have a vocal coach. I warm up a little with Shane Fontaine, my guitar player, and Todd Caldwell, which is the trio that is my show, And I'm still having a great time.
When you perform live, and you will perform live again, do you presumably you sing Our House, which is one of your most famous songs that you penned and wrote? And
yeah, I know what people want to hear, but they also know that I'm going to sing something they haven't heard yet. And I sing all those old songs with the same passion I had when I wrote them, because I believe my audience deserve that. They deserve my best.
Yeah.
They deserve everything I have, which is the reason they came to see me in the first place. And I want to make sure that they understand 2 things. 1, I want to be there. And 2, I'm going to sing them the best way I can.
That song in particular, the story of that song is about literally the house you shared with Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, I mean, basically the story is that I had taken Joni to breakfast at a delicatessen on Ventura Boulevard called Art's Deli. It's very famous. We had breakfast. It was towards the end of winter. It was a shitty day. It was cold. It was rainy. It was miserable. When we finished breakfast, we're walking back to Joni's car, and there was an antique store. And so we're looking in the window, and Joni sees this vase that she wants to buy. And it's about 10 inches high. It's got some painted flowers around the edge. It was very cheap. It was beautiful, and she wanted to buy it, so she did. We get back in Joni's car. We drive to the house in Laurel Canyon. We get into the house, and I say, hey, Joan, why don't, and don't forget it's a cold winter's morning, late winter. And I said, Joan, why don't I light a fire and you put some flowers in that vase that you just bought today? And an hour later, our house was done, finished.
And you've talked about this before, but it's still remarkable to me that the second live gig that you performed as Crosby, Stills, Nash, and at this point Young, with Neil Young, was the second ever gig was in 1969, August 15th, Woodstock.
Our second gig ever in front of people.
When you were at Woodstock, I'm curious about Woodstock, because part of me wonders whether Woodstock would have been seen as such a historical event had it not been filmed, had there not been a film about Woodstock. Because there were other concerts at that time. There were other huge outdoor concerts.
I just saw Summer of Soul.
Summer of Soul, exactly. Right? Happened the same time.
What a fabulous concert.
And that was black artists in Harlem, and amazing performance that never had the same attention. But I wonder, did you feel that Woodstock was historic? I mean, you would go on to play other festivals, but did it feel that way at the time?
Yeah, because there were so many people.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're trying to sing Guinevere with one acoustic guitar and 2 voices to 500,000 people,
God.
It leaves you thinking, boy, this is something. And we knew that it was going to be a big event, but it seems to have outgrown its myth. Yes, it was a great concert. Yes, there was plenty of people there. Yes, there were plenty of musicians there. Yes, there was some brilliant music made. But, look how big Woodstock is today. it's grown and grown and grown and outgrown its myth. So, yeah, I mean, and don't forget, followed closely by Altamont.
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, that was like the summer of the moon landing, Altamont, and then the Manson murders.
In that order, yeah.
And widely seen as like the end of that sort of quote-unquote era of love. Like the summer, if the summer of love was the beginning, the summer of '69 was the end.
Well, you know, I don't think the 60s actually finished until Nixon resigned in what was that, 73, 74?
Yeah. 74, yeah. You know, I wonder, and we'll talk a little bit about your relationship with David Crosby, but it's remarkable because you started to collaborate in 1968 with David Crosby and Stephen Stills, and then eventually Neil Young. And you would go on to make some of the most iconic songs, piece of music in American history. And that collaboration lasted a very long time. It was a very fruitful collaboration. I mean, certainly the three of you with Stephen Stills, you were performing and collaborating into, as recently as, 6-7 years ago.
Yes.
Before we talk about sort of why you're not working together anymore, let's talk about why you did work so well together. I mean, I have my theories. I mean, your voices just were perfectly matched, but there has to be something beyond that. There has to be a creative energy.
Yes, we had to be friends.
What was that creative energy that you guys all brought to the table that made it work, that made it possible for you to make these songs?
Because we knew what we had. We knew that we were 4 decent singers. We knew that we were 4 decent writers. We knew that we were 4 decent musicians.
But that's not enough. You have to, it's still a grind. You have to bleed those songs out. You have to
That's right.
Sweat them out.
And we did that.
There's something else.
We sweated much more over Deja Vu than we did over the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record. You got to understand, when we did that first record, I was in love with Joni and living with Joni. Stephen was in love with Judy Collins. And David was in love with his girlfriend, Christine. Mm-hmm. Now, within the year, I'm not with Joan, Stephen's not with Judy, and Christine had been killed in a motorcycle, in a traffic accident. And so it was a very different vibe between the first Crosby, Stills and Nash record and Deja Vu. And yes, we had to sweat it out, but we knew we had something, and we knew that we had the songs and the ability to sing and play those songs to make ourselves feel great. And that's what we did. Because we knew that if we felt great about it, chances are that you would feel good about it.
That triggers a thought in my head, which is about the process of songwriting. Because obviously a lot of songwriting is writing about your own experiences, right? Just Marrakesh Express, you were on that train. You were writing about the ducks and pigs and chickens and the things you were saying. And Our House, you were writing about your house. You wrote these songs about the things you were seeing. But then there are different approaches to songwriting. I mean, oftentimes some artists are writing things that are just completely imagined, that are not really a reflection of their lives. It's like a novelist who writes a story that is not about their own experience, but they're just conjuring an image in their mind. And I wonder, at that time, right, writing Deja Vu, all of you have split with your partners, and that having a partner, being in love, can be this incredibly fruitful moment. It can inspire lyrics and songs and thinking, but then losing that can also inspire.
Absolutely. Just like, I used to be a king and simple man. Yeah, sure. You'll never be the same. Yeah. I write about what happens to me. And after my relationship with Joni crumbled, I had to write about it. What else could I do?
How do you approach songwriting? What do? You sit down.
I have to believe something. I have to find something out that's interesting to me. I go into the rabbit hole of learning all about what it is I'm thinking, and then I write. And that's what I do.
Yeah.
Same as, Chicago, We Can Change the World, Immigration Man, Field Worker, about the campesinos in California and how they were treated, just because of growing our food and pulling it up out of the earth. A lot of songs, not just love songs and the breakup of love songs, but also what's going on in my life. And, with a song like Field Worker, I had gone to David Geffen's, I think it was his 40th birthday party. He was a multimillionaire at that point, and his birthday party was, sushi for 8 million people, whatever you want. And after that, I drove to the food storage place for the campesinos, for the field workers, and it was empty. And I had to write about that difference. And so there's an example of what I do as a songwriter. I have to believe in something, and I have to really know what I'm talking about. Some songs have happened pretty fast. Just a Song Before I Go and Our House were done within an hour of each other. Not of each other, but it took me an hour to write Our House. It took me an hour to write Just a Song.
I mean, just a song. Just a Song Before I Go, I think still one of your biggest hits, one of Crosby, Stills, and Nash's biggest hits, maybe the biggest hit ever. You literally wrote that like somebody said, oh, let's see how good you are as a songwriter.
Yeah, I was at a home of a friend of mine who was a low-level drug dealer in Hawaii. And we'd been smoking, and, I had a couple of hours to kill before I had to catch a plane back to the studio. And I got up to leave, and he said, hey, you're supposed to be some big shot songwriter. I bet you can't write a song just before you go. And he had no idea that he had given me the title for the song in the question that he asked. And so that's what happened. And it was, in fact, our biggest hits. But something happened that was very interesting. I just finished a tour about a month and a half ago, which was the continuation of the tour that I had to stop 2 years ago because of COVID. There was a lady working at one of the gigs. And as I'm leaving, she hands me this envelope. And I go, thank you, and I put it in my pocket, and I get on the bus. And I forget about this envelope until the next day. And as I'm getting dressed, I realize I have an envelope in my pocket that I haven't opened. So I opened it. Inside was a check for $500 from the family of the kid that made me write the song in the first place. They knew he was a low-level drug dealer. They figured that he had not paid me, and they did. So, 30 years later, I got paid.
Wow. I wonder, Graham, I think in order to be able to write a song in 30 minutes that would go on to be the biggest chart-topping song that Crosby, Stills, Nash released, you have to have practiced writing a lot of songs, right? You have to go through the process of just writing a lot. And I wonder, how much over your career have you thrown out? For every song that you record and you put to tape, how many songs do you just discard?
I don't want to waste your time.
Huh.
I'm not gonna sing you a song that I don't think is worth singing. Why would I do that? Time is all we have. Time is our only currency lately.
How do you know when that song is not good enough? Because you might have songs in the discard pile that could be great.
I know if I'm halfway through a verse and I don't really believe it, why bother? I'm only going to play you something that is worth playing for you.
How do you know?
I don't know how I know. I know that it doesn't make me smile. I know that I don't want to immediately play it for my wife, Amy. I know that I don't want to play it for Stephen or David. It's just not good enough. So why bother? And I know. I've been doing it a long time. It's just like a muscle, It's a songwriting muscle. You got to keep the blood going. You got to keep it pumped. You got to keep it exercised. You got to keep it in top form. And that's what songwriting is for me.
Is there a part of songwriting for you, or maybe not a part, maybe the biggest part, that is also therapeutic, that you actually are working through your own demons, your own
Yeah.
anxieties,
Yeah,
depression?
I do have a therapist. I never bothered with a therapist, but since I've lived in New York, I have taken advantage of being able to talk to someone. And yeah, I pour out my heart in my songs, and that's what I've been doing all my life. And I'm, if you're doing something for 60 years and you're on top of your game, you get good at what you do.
I was surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be surprised, to learn that despite the fact that the relationship with David Crosby, this creative explosion, really lasted so long. I mean, because normally with creative people, it doesn't last that long. There's egos, there's fights, there's falling outs. You guys did have that, but it still survived for so long. And I wonder what it was about when you and David Crosby got together. What was it? Because you did have falling outs. There were moments where he was not kind to you. Maybe you were not kind to him. But when you're so, when ego gets involved and fame, it can corrupt friendships, right? And there were moments throughout your career where the both of you really didn't work together, but you still managed to make it work.
Yeah, because we loved each other, and we don't now, and it's very simple.
What happened? I mean, at this point in your career, in your life, like it should all be coming together.
But it's not, because we lost that connection. You have this connection as musicians, and once that thread has been broken, it's very hard to glue it back together. And that's the last I'm going to say about my relationship with David.
Well, I hope it can be mended. I really do, because the two of you have changed music.
Yes. So what?
Yeah. I wonder how you see your role as a public artist, right? Because you're not just an artist. I mean, there's lots of artists, and lots of them just make art for themselves. But you're making art for yourself and for the world, whether you're putting it out there. So how do you see your role as a public artist? Like, what is your obligation as an artist?
My obligation is to reflect the time in which I live. I think that's what all musicians should do. They should talk about what's going on in their lives right now, wherever they live, whatever they're doing. We have to reflect the times in which we live.
And what about your obligation to your fans?
I give them my best. That's all I can do. I love the people that come and buy tickets, and I loved on this particular tour that we were just talking about. There are people that had saved their tickets from 2 years ago, and I loved them for it. And I told them, and I said, look, what that means to me is hope. Yes, today is screwed, but tomorrow it's going to be great. And that's what the attitude of English people is, having made it through 2 world wars, as we talked about earlier.
How do you stay? I mean, here you are, at this point in your life and career where, there's I think there's a lot of renewed interest in aging and how people age well. And you are aging and have aged well, and you're still creating things that you're incredibly proud of. How do you stay creative, and how do you stay motivated to make things? What gives you that creative spark?
Curiosity. I'm curious about everything. I want to know how everything works. I want to know how you plug this microphone in. I want to know what you're talking about. I'm curious. Yeah. When I did Wild Tales, my autobiography, I did a book tour, where you go to Barnes and Noble and and you sit down and you bullshit with the people and sign books and stuff. This particular event was in Manchester, and I'm sitting there and people are in line and they've got their book and I'm, hey, how are you? What's your name? How do you spell that? La 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 la. This kid comes up to me and he hands me an 8x10 manila envelope and he says, "You really need this." And I said, "I do? What is it?" He said, "I'm not going to tell you, but do me a favor. Don't open it until you get to the hotel." I said, "Okay." So I gave it to my tour manager, who was collecting, ephemera from fans. And I got back to the hotel and I opened it up. And inside, was my school report from when I was 11.
Wow.
I have no idea how this guy got it.
Wow.
But one of the things that one of the teachers said was this: this boy wants to know everything. They actually wrote that on my school report. This boy wants to know everything.
Did you think of yourself as a good student when you were a kid?
Not at all.
Did you think you were intelligent when you were a little kid?
I don't think I ever thought like that.
Like, did you think you were a smart kid, or did you think that, oh, the smart kids are the other kids?
I always thought that everyone was smarter than me. I still, to this day, think everyone's smarter than me. But I have to realize that I am who I am, and I'm not perfect. But I do have my strengths, and I do have my weaknesses, and I get on with my life. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I've always done. And here I am at 80 talking to you.
I've read that one of the things that you try to do is to create something every day, whether it's photographs or music or art. Tell me more about that. What do you try to create every day? What might you make?
I want to challenge the universe. I challenge the universe every single day.
And how do you do it?
Because I talk internally to myself. I go, okay, world, I know you've got some great shit out there. Here I am. I've got my camera. I've got my brain. I'm coming out into the world. Show me. What have you got? And invariably, I see something fantastic. I put myself in that mood. I'm almost willing the universe to challenge me and show me things that other people don't see. That's why I'm very proud of my new book of photographs that I just put out a couple of months ago. That's what I do. I challenge the world. Hey, I'm going out there. What the fuck have you got?
Tell me what you like to photograph.
I can tell you what I don't like to photograph. I don't like to photograph sunsets. I don't photograph stuff to match my couch.
Yeah.
I don't do, I'm all for surreal moments that happen in front of me that if I don't have the courage to press the trigger at the correct time, I've lost.
Yeah.
And I'm still waiting for Elvis to come back on the back of an elephant. And I'll be there with my camera and I'll be there taking pictures.
Especially if it's a blue elephant.
Yes.
Elvis and a blue elephant. That'd be all over Instagram.
All over. That would go viral, as they say.
How often do you take photos?
Isn't this fantastic about Stranger Things and Kate Bush?
Yes.
It went back to number one after 30 odd years.
That's incredible.
Fantastic.
Tell me what do you take photos every day? Do you go out and take photos every day?
Yes.
So you live in Manhattan in New York, and do you just go out on the street and take photos?
That's right.
So tell me what you might...
Just like everybody else.
And tell me what you might be looking for today, for example.
Something really weird. Something really out of the ordinary. Something that's beautifully composed, even though it's in the gutter. I can find beauty everywhere because I'm looking for it constantly.
Do you think you need to do that in order to stimulate other parts of your brain to do the other things that you do, like write music?
Yeah, I do. But the basic is curiosity and a willingness to make a left turn when you don't think you're going to make a left turn. I am led by my life. I don't lead my life. I am led by it.
What are you influenced by? What impacts how you write music now?
Something I see that I need to express my feelings about. And of course, I live in Manhattan. There's a billion pictures out there. There's a billion stories. I'm just looking for the right one. And I always find it. And it's been that way all my life.
Did you always feel like you were a creative person, or did it take some time before you were able to think of yourself as a creative person?
The very first time that I ever heard my voice come out of a radio, I knew what I wanted to be, and I knew what I had to do with the rest of my life. The Hollies were playing a show at the BBC very early, I think maybe middle 1963. We're walking to the BBC studios in London, To my left are two men that are putting in a shop window that had been broken. Huh. A huge shop window that had been broken. And they had a small transistor radio. And Ain't That Just Like Me, which was the very first song we ever recorded, came out of that radio. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard my voice come out of a radio. I knew at that moment what that made me feel like and what I would have to do with the rest of my life.
I can't imagine. I mean, I can because I'm not a pop star, but I've been on the radio for 25 years. And I remember hearing my voice on the radio for the first time 25 years ago, and it was thrilling to hear my voice come out of a radio in a car. It was thrilling. What do you remember about that moment?
I thought my voice was horrible. I still don't think I've got a great voice. I know what to do with it, but, look at Aretha, look at Whitney Houston, look at all the people that can really sing. Look at Ray Charles, come on.
But then look at Tom Waits, look at Bob Dylan.
Indeed. And I'm just so proud to be a musician. I mean, thank God, like I said, my parents, excuse me, my parents are the reason, that I'm talking to you right now. Because they could have easily have persuaded me not to follow my passion for music. And to get a real job and to get a wife and to have kids and to do the normal stuff that normal people do. But they recognized that I had a passion for what it was I wanted to do, and they did not persuade me not to do that, and I'll be forever grateful.
You also have this whole other side of you, which is as an artist who prints art, high quality digital art. You've been doing this since the early 90s. What would you be if you were not a musician? If this didn't happen to you, what do you imagine you would have become?
Wow, I have no idea. I can only go from what I am.
Yeah.
I can't think that way about what I would do had I not had music in my life or the creative process. I've never thought that. I've always known that I could do it. I've always done it.
Do you think that creativity is elusive? Do you think it's something that is actually accessible for anyone who really pursues it? Or do you think it's like something where like the hand of God touches some people and they can be creative and others just don't have it?
It's both. There are many people that I wonder why me, and that was what Just a Song Before I Go was about, And I stood on the steps of the Midland Hotel. I'd gone to see my mother. She was poorly in hospital. And I'm standing in front of that famous hotel where we talked about meeting the Everly Brothers years earlier. And I'm looking at the people and I'm realizing that they don't want to be here. They don't like their job. They don't like their boss. They don't like being forced to do this every single day for the rest of their lives. And I began to realize, why me? What happened? Why did I escape? Why? And I realized it was because I followed my heart. I followed my heart, and that's what happened to me. And I always do that. And my mother taught me how to do that. She said, you're a good kid. You've got a good heart. Follow your heart. Your heart will tell you what's right and what's wrong. And that's how I've lived my life. My heart knows what's right. My heart knows what's wrong.
And maybe you followed your curiosity.
Always.
Would you mind playing a song for us?
This latest record of mine has been an amazing experience. It's been done remotely. I'm going to play you the opening verse to this song called Stars and Stripes. And what it is, I have a simple song. I would put it down on 2 tracks. I have a small, tiny studio here in my apartment here in the city. I would put an acoustic guitar down and my voice. And I would send it to Shane in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
He would put on his guitars and a vocal and send it back to me. I would check it out. I would usually love what he did. I would send it to Brooklyn, to Todd Caldwell's studio, and Todd would put on all the piano parts. And then he would send it to his brother Toby, who's a drummer who lives in Lubbock, Texas. And he would put the drums on. And then they would send it all back to me, and I would have Todd, who's technically much better at all this than me, figure it all out and mix it. The secret is you have to make it feel as if those guys were in the same room at the same time making music.
Yes.
And when I listen to what I've done, it sounds exactly like that, but it was done so remotely. It was a really interesting experience.
I want to hear it.
Oh, so let me play you this opening line here. I sometimes wonder why the world is like it is, frozen by the fear of change. If we keep believing all the lies meant to divide us, there's no one else that we can blame. I can't remember when my world was not on fire, where people lived in fear and flames. I sit here watching as the fire keeps getting higher, burning up the mountain range. Stars and stripes are out there waving goodbye to all that's true. I can't wait. So and it goes on and on, right? So I put that song down.
I don't want you to stop. Wow.
I put that song down, and when you hear the record, you're going to realize exactly what this remote recording sounds like, because it sounds like we're all in the same room playing the same song, even though we were thousands of miles different.
It's a beautiful, beautiful song. Wow. And you're right. You can still hit those notes.
Well, it's been a while. It's been almost 60-odd years, so I should be able to sing notes.
One sort of last question I had for you, Round. I know that you've always been politically engaged, and certainly, you became a U.S. citizen, I think 40 years ago or something like that, maybe longer. And this is your adopted country, the United States, and
yes.
You are, I think, fair to say, politically sort of left, and you are still very much kind of engaged around progressive issues. Tell me about your politics and how that's evolved, because oftentimes people become more conservative as they get older, and your politics seem to be even more kind of progressive.
I've never seen this country in such a chaotic state.
Yeah,
I thought that Watergate and Nixon was the bottom of the barrel in terms of political activity. But I must tell you that Donald Trump has far outdone Richard Nixon. This last 4 years have been very difficult to live in. I'll be very honest with you. I feel as if I'm witnessing the end of the American empire. Mm. Any country that can see 19 of its children blown apart in an hour and does nothing about it has no future.
Yeah.
And that's what I truly believe. I don't think that the political situation is workable. I mean, for instance, how would you like to rule the lives of 300 million people?
Yeah.
What an insane job it must be. And I understand that politics is a difficult game. but I'm watching the end of this empire. I don't understand the Republicans. There's a song on my new record called Golden Idols, where all these people like Trump and like all the people, McCarthy and all these people that are telling people lies, absolutely lying to them. They're getting found out, and it's all crumbling. And I really believe I'm seeing the end of the American empire.
You and your fellow former members of Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young decided to remove your music from Spotify. Actually, it was a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a statement you made. It was sort of, you were making a stand against Joe Rogan and your views on his.
I was making a stand, not necessarily about Joe Rogan, but I was making a stand about mis and disinformation. And there's a big difference.
Yeah.
Misinformation is, I had eggs and bacon for breakfast this morning, but you actually had cereal. And you forgot that you had cereal and not eggs and bacon. That's misinformation. Disinformation is telling lies in an effort to persuade people one way or the other. That's disinformation. And I've seen a lot of it. And I'm seeing more of it, particularly in social media, particularly on Facebook, particularly on Instagram. It's crazy. And it's one of the great things about the net is that it gives everybody a voice.
Yeah.
One of the worst things about the net is that it gives everybody a voice.
Sure. Yeah.
And it's chaotic out there. But I will continue to smile. I will continue to be curious. I will continue to create until I'm dead.
What's something you're listening to now that is new that you
It's
like?
all my music.
All your music. Anything out there that you're listening to that you're like, yeah, that's pretty good?
I know that it will find me. I mean, things like This Is America by, whatever his name was.
Childish Gambino, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Sure.
Stuff will find me. Stuff, important stuff will find me. But right now, I've been involved in my music and me and David and Stephen and Neil's music and all our archives and all the projects that I'm working on.
You still listen to Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young?
No.
No, yeah.
My friend Joel Bernstein, who's an archivist, he's an archivist for Joni and for Neil and for Prince and for Bob Dylan. And he was a guitar tech for all of those people. He's working on a CSNY acoustic from 1969 and 1970. So even though I'm not listening to CSNY, I actually have to because, they're in the process of putting that thing together. But I'm not enamored about what we did. I know that we have worked tirelessly to bring good music out, and that's what we're doing. And it's stopped, and so there you go.
Graham, what do you want people to say about you in 40 years? If they listen to your music or they say, oh, Graham Nash. What do you want them? What do you want to leave people with?
I want to leave people with the thought that I tried my best. I tried my best at everything I do. I've tried to be the best father. I've tried to be the best husband, the best boyfriend, the best musician. I'll never make it, but I'm trying. And that's what I'd like people to remember. I tried my best.
And when people talk to you about how your music shapes the contours of their lives, their marriages, their courtships, their breakups, their road trips, their children's births. I mean, that's a huge deal that you are part of the lives of so many people. Do you ever stop and think about that? Are you ever able to kind of absorb what that means?
Not really. I'm much more interested in the song I'm writing and the record I'm making right now and the show I'm going to do tomorrow. Because there's not much you can do about the past. There's not. I do know that we have made a lot of very interesting music, and I'm glad to have been a part of it, and I'm grateful to be a musician, and here I am, and I'm getting on with my life, and it's that simple.
Graham Nash, thank you so much for joining us. It's great having you.
Thank you very much, and listen to my new record when it comes out. I think you're going to really like it.
I will. I can't wait. That was music legend Graham Nash. And by the way, if you want to see some of those photos that Graham takes on his walks around New York City, He released a book last year about those photos. He took the earliest photo when he was 11 years old, by the way. It's a portrait of his mom. You can find a link to that book at our website, and some of the songs mentioned in this episode. Just go to thegreatcreators.com/Nash. We publish all of the show notes for every episode we've ever done at thegreatcreators.com. And be sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel so you won't miss any of our videos. I'm Guy Raz. This is The Great Creators. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you here next time.